Sur y bueno, vamos a grabar la sesión y bueno, nada, voy a presentar a Janina, voy a procurar ser breve, su currículo de ella es muy grande y yo sé que tampoco eso refleja todo lo que ella ha hecho, ¿no? A nivel personal y profesional, así que voy a ser muy breve tomando en cuenta el asunto del tiempo. Bueno, antes que nada, quiero agradecerle a ella de manera personal porque a ella ha sido muy importante para mí a nivel profesional y personal y he encontrado mucho refugio en sus libros, así que bueno, ya comparto algo personal y vamos a presentarla. Hoy nos acompaña la doctora Janina Scarlet, psicóloga clínica, investigadora y autora reconocida internacionalmente por su trabajo innovador en el campo de la salud mental, trauma y psicoterapia basada en la compasión. La doctora Scarlett es profesora clínica de la Universidad de Carolina en San Diego y fundadora de Superhero Therapy, un enfoque creativo que utiliza metáforas de superhéroes, ciencia ficción y cultura popular para ayudar a las personas a enfrentar la ansiedad, la depresión, el trauma y otros desafíos emocionales. Ella es autora de diversos libros, conozco varios de ellos, aunque hay algunos que veo que cada vez va sacando más. Y bueno, el día de hoy la tenemos acá, estoy siendo muy breve para dedicarle más tiempo a ella. Y bueno, bienvenida Janina y muchas gracias de estar aquí, así que les agradezco que enciendan sus cámaras. Es el requisito para que puedan estar acá, creo que es importante eso también. Y bueno, nada, gracias. Adelante, Janina.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's such an honor to be here with all of you. Happy upcoming International Women's Day to all of you. It is truly, truly an honor for me to be here. I am going to share my slides. And so I wanted to start by sharing with you about a book that I really loved as a child, and that was The Three Musketeers. And in fact, I loved this book so much that when I was about 8 years old, my neighbor, an elderly lady, asked me what I wanted to be when I grow up. And I said I wanted to be a musketeer. And my neighbor laughed and she said, "Well, you can't. You can't be a musketeer." And I couldn't understand why. And she said, "You can't be a musketeer because girls are not supposed to fight." And I was so upset and so angry about this interaction. And it actually made me reflect on how women are typically portrayed in books. And I realized that most of the main characters that I was reading about in books had only two jobs: to be beautiful or to be rescued. Most of these women were used as a prize, as a trophy or a medal. They had little to no agency, and their only goal was to get married. And the more I thought about it, the more upset I became because I wanted to be a musketeer like the characters I was reading about. I wanted to fight with swords. I wanted to have adventure. And I wanted to be a leading character, not only a side character, the way I saw women being portrayed in many books. And it was right then that my grandfather, who witnessed this interaction, pulled me aside. My grandfather said, "You know what? I have a different book that I want to read to you." And so he pulled out a blank piece of paper. He said, "This book is magical. It is written in this invisible ink that you're not old enough to read yet. But when you're old enough, you'll be able to read it yourself and you'll be able to share it with others. But for now, I will read it to you." And so my grandfather took this blank piece of paper and he moved his finger as if he was reading the invisible ink, and he read me a story about a little girl with my name, a girl who went on adventures and saved other people from monsters. In this story, my older brother and my older male cousins were all kidnapped by an evil monster, and it had to be me who was the only one who was small enough to crawl through the little spaces to free them and outsmart the monster. My grandfather read this story to me every week until the day he died. And what it taught me is that if the books you want to read don't exist yet, then you can make them. You can create them yourself. In fact, you can write a book in which you can be the hero of your own story. And I believe that each and every one of you and each person in the world deserves to be the main hero, the main character of your story. And I believe that all of our stories start with an origin story. And so I want to share my origin story with you. My origin story began in Ukraine, where I was born and raised. 4 years ago, I used to have to explain where Ukraine is on the map because most people had never heard of this country. Nowadays, that's not the case because unfortunately, Ukraine has been in the news a lot lately because of the ongoing war. I grew up in this beautiful city that you see in the picture in front of you. And when I was 3 years old, there was a massive explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. And I joke now as an adult that I'm still waiting for my spidey senses or some kind of special abilities. But in my case, and in the case of all children and all people exposed to Chernobyl disaster, I spent most of my childhood in and out of hospitals. There are some side effects that I still experience even to this day. Whenever the weather changes, I get severe migraines, which sometimes lead to seizures. And I remember being in that hospital room and wishing that I had some kind of magical powers, some kind of special abilities, so that I could help multiple children in that hospital. I was 12 years old when my family and I moved to the United States. I don't know how many of you remember being 12 or how many of you successfully repressed that time of your life. I normally joke that we need to start an I survived being 12 support group for adults because I think that's one of the most challenging times of our lives. And so at 12 years old, I didn't speak English. I didn't have any friends. I was an outcast. And kids in school used to bully me. They would ask me if I'm radioactive or contagious or if I glow in the dark. And I used to think that that bullying was my fault. I thought I was some kind of a freak and that I deserved it. Nobody in my school talked about mental health. And so I thought that I was the only one going through depression, anxiety, and PTSD. Only I didn't have those terms. I didn't know those words. I just knew that I felt different somehow. But then everything changed a few years later when I saw this movie, The X-Men. In case you're not familiar with the X-Men are superheroes or mutants, each of which has some kind of a genetic mutation that gives them superpowers. For example, Mystique, the woman with blue skin, can shapeshift into any other character. Wolverine, the guy with the claws, can heal himself from any illness or injury. But the character that immediately caught my attention was Storm. Most of my life, my health was always affected by weather changes. But Storm has this ability to control the weather. And because of her, I started rethinking my origin story. And instead of thinking of myself as a victim, I started thinking of myself as a survivor. And it was because of this movie that I signed up for my first ever psychology class in high school. And now I specialize in incorporating superheroes into mental health to help people overcome anxiety, depression, and trauma. This movie showed me that many of us go through something painful, something traumatic, but we don't talk about it. We wear some kind of an I am fine mask. We pretend to be okay, but inside we feel very lonely in our experience. But if we can find a fictional character, maybe a superhero, that has been through something similar that we have, then I think it gives us vocabulary to be able to say, me too. To be able to say, I know what it's like to be able to share this experience with others. And so essentially, what this process allows us to do is through identifying with a fictional character, it allows us to make meaning out of our own experience. And even to think about how we might then use what happened to us as a way to help other people. This is called post-traumatic growth. And unlike post-traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic growth is kind of like a hero's journey. It's a way that we can make meaning out of what happened to us. It's a way that we can choose the kind of hero that we want to be and how we can show up to others, for others. I remember when I was doing my postdoctoral training, I was working with the military, and many service members I was working with believed themselves to be a failure. They would tell me, I wanted to be Superman and I failed. And so this is where my geeky knowledge came in, and I started asking them questions. I said, is Superman truly invincible, or does he have any kind of vulnerability? And most of my clients would say, well, Superman is vulnerable to kryptonite, which is a green substance from Superman's home planet to which he's basically allergic. In small quantities, kryptonite can weaken Superman's powers. In large quantities, it can kill him. And so I would ask my clients, if Superman is vulnerable to kryptonite, does that make him any less of a superhero? And every single one of my clients would say, no, of course not. And I would give them a moment to think about it. And there would be this light bulb. And then they would break into a big smile and they would say, oh, I see what you did there. Because the truth is, it's not despite these vulnerabilities that we care. It's because of them. When we can relate to a fictional character because of their vulnerability, we feel more understood. We feel more human, and these characters feel more human to us. We feel even more inspired by these characters. And so this is the point of superhero therapy. The point of superhero therapy is to use metaphors from stories, from books, television stories, movies, and even video games as a tool in evidence-based therapies like ACT. And the goal of it is to help our clients to become their own version of a superhero in real life. It's intended for people of all ages, so not only children. and it has been utilized for post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, addiction, and chronic illness. And if you remember nothing else from this talk, please just remember this one slide. The most important rule of superhero therapy is that you do not have to be the expert in pop culture. You don't have to read 80 years worth of Batman comics to do this work. Your client is the expert. The only thing you have to be is open-minded and curious. It's about inviting our clients to tell us what they like about certain superheroes, what strengths they derive from these characters, as a way to utilize these characters as role models in treatment. Why is this important? During most difficult times of our lives, most of us tend to feel alone. This is especially true for our clients with PTSD, and this is especially true for women. And so, how are women treated and how are women shamed in our society? Very often, when women have needs, we're told that we're too dramatic or crazy or too emotional, too sensitive. We're blamed when something bad happens to us. We're blamed when something bad happens to someone else. We're told we're asking for it. In other words, we are a living contradiction. As women, we're told that we need to be thin, but not too thin. Be educated, but not too educated. We're told that we need to speak up, but not too much. We're told that we need to be sexy, but not too sexy. We're told that we need to have children and work, but we also can't forget to attend to our kids. Basically, if you're a woman, whatever choice you make, you're told that you're doing it wrong. I imagine many of you can relate to that experience, at least I can. And so the idea is that I think for many of us, we have this experience of yeah, me too. We have this experience of profound loneliness, right? We're trying so hard to do the right thing and be a good person, but it never feels like we're doing enough. Now, I've mentioned loneliness several times, and the reason why is because I want to talk about how much of a role loneliness plays in our physical and mental health. Over the last 20 years, research related to loneliness, meaning an experience where we don't feel understood, heard, or supported by other people. Loneliness can lead to increased cardiovascular risk, increased risk for Alzheimer's disease, increased risk for mental health pathology like depression, anxiety, or suicide, assumptions of worthlessness or burdensomeness, which in themselves are risk factors for suicide, increased inflammation and immune problems, which can lead to further illness and chronic pain, and risk of premature mortality in older adults. Loneliness is so serious that some scientists are calling loneliness the new smoking. Research studies looking at 300,000 patients are finding that loneliness poses as high of a risk for early death as chronic smoking or alcohol abuse. Not in terms of the way that smoking affects our lungs or the way that drinking affects our liver, but in the way that they both shorten our lifespan. Loneliness is as much physical as it is psychological. So much so that when lonely people take a painkiller like Tylenol or aspirin, they feel significantly less lonely for a day or two. This does not mean that we should be giving our lonely patients aspirin. What it means is that loneliness is a serious problem that we as mental health professionals need to take very seriously. But there's good news. And the good news is that social connection and belonging creates the very benefits that are opposite of all the risk factors of loneliness. And that means that when we feel a sense of belonging, we have significantly improved health. That means improved heart conditions, improved immune health, reduced physical and mental health symptoms, increase in certain chemicals like opiates and oxytocin that help to reduce our physical and emotional pain, and increased lifespan. And so I really like to talk about this hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is called the cuddle hormone or the love hormone because our body releases it when we love someone, when we cuddle someone. And I call it a magic potion because oxytocin is involved in so many meaningful things. Oxytocin is involved in bonding, affection, childbirth, sexual intimacy. And what's interesting is that oxytocin is also released when we are receiving help from someone or when we're giving help to somebody else. And it is oxytocin that is the magical ingredient in helping us to live longer, healthier lives. Now, the most wonderful news of this is that what you do on a daily basis is that you help people. Each and every day, you are helping people. And what that means is that your job is literally making you healthier. How wonderful, right? That your job is making you healthier. That just by helping other people, it means that you will live longer and healthier lives. And I think of social connection as this magical element that creates this experience of you are not alone, right? Knowing that we're not alone helps people to be less ashamed of what they're going through. It helps people to feel more hopeful. And I really like this quote from self-compassion researcher Kristen Neff, who says, "It's not that misery loves company, it's that company is the antidote to misery." So I imagine many of you are thinking, well, that's wonderful, right? It's great that social connection helps us live longer and healthier lives. But what do we do when clients are struggling to connect with other people? And this is where fictional characters come in. Believe it or not, fictional characters can serve as temporary replacement for social connection until our clients are ready to establish social connection with other people. So I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I was working with a teenage girl. We'll call her Emily. That's not her real name. Emily's parents brought her to see me because Emily was struggling with severe depression. Emily and her older sister were initially separated at birth and then reunited a few years later and then adopted together when Emily was about 5 years old. And although Emily and her sister grew up with loving adoptive parents, when I started working with Emily, I found out that she was separated from her sister again. Her older sister was struggling with mental health and was sent to a hospital for a year-long residential treatment. And for Emily, this was devastating. Her parents said that she stopped communicating. They said that she was regressing to childlike behaviors, playing with toys that she only played with when she was a small child. And they said that she keeps watching anime on her phone over and over and over again. And so I asked Emily's parents, what anime is she watching? They didn't know. So I asked Emily, what anime are you watching? And Emily said that she likes this anime called The Demon Slayer. At this point, I didn't know anything about The Demon Slayer. I'd never heard of it. By now, I've seen everything that's out so far. I've seen the anime, I watched the movies, I read the books, I have the t-shirt. But back then, I didn't know anything about it. And so I asked Emily to tell me about Demon Slayer. And we spent the first 3 sessions talking about Demon Slayer only. So here's what I learned. The show is about a brother and sister, a boy Tanjiro, who you see on the left, and his sister Nezuko, who you see on the right. Their entire family was killed by evil demons. And Nezuko herself was bitten by that same demon, which is why she's wearing a bamboo muzzle. If Nezuko bites someone, she will turn into a full demon. And so her brother Tanjiro becomes a demon slayer to make sure that no child loses their family members the way he and his sister did. And most importantly, to find a cure for his sister. No matter what, he never gives up on her. And so after we spent 3 sessions talking about summaries of the show, I asked Emily if there was a character that she identified with on the show. And she said that she really identified with the brother, Tanjiro. And I said, how come? And Emily said, because I feel like my sister is facing her own demon right now. And I want to help her, but I don't know how. I said, that makes sense, of course. And so I asked Emily, how would you feel about becoming your own version of a demon slayer in real life? And Emily said she wanted to try it. She didn't know what it meant, but she was on board. And I said, well, if Tanjiro was here, what would he advise you to do? How would he advise you to help your sister? And Emily thought about it and she said, Tanjiro would tell me to read my sister's mail and write back. And I said, what do you mean? And it turned out that Emily's sister was writing letters to her from the hospital, but Emily was too scared to open them. She was scared that the letters would make her sad. So she was collecting them, but not opening them. And I said, what would Tanjiro tell you? And Emily said, he would tell me to open the letters, that being a demon slayer means opening the letters. And I said, okay. So next week, Emily brought all the letters. She opened them in a session with me. She read them all. And then she wrote a letter to her sister. And then the two started writing to each other, which really helped them to stay in touch. And then Emily asked if her family, if her parents would be willing to watch Demon Slayer with her. And so on different days, they would watch one episode of Demon Slayer together, and Emily would tell them what each episode meant to her. And it was because of this show that Emily was able to tell her parents what she was going through, what she was experiencing. And it was because of this anime that she was able to use her voice to reconnect with her family again. When we were finishing our therapy together, this is what Emily shared with me. She said, when my dog died, I didn't cry. When my aunt died, I didn't cry. But when someone dies in an anime, it's like a balloon that explodes all of a sudden, and then you just cry. It's like all the tears I've been holding back that entire time finally explode. And that made a lot of sense to me. For many of us, If it has not been safe for us to process our grief, we might not know how to cry. We might hold our feelings to ourselves. But what's really interesting is when we see another character going through something painful, either an anime or a TV show, in a book or a movie, it gives us the permission to cry. It gives us the permission to grieve also. And so I mentioned that for many people who are lonely, who maybe don't have meaningful social connections yet with other people, that sometimes fictional characters can serve as social surrogates, as almost a surrogate friend, surrogate family member, or surrogate support group for that person. And science supports this idea. It seems that when people are lonely, they reach for what they know. They might rewatch their favorite show like Friends rather than just whatever's on TV. And when people feel lonely, rewatching a favorite show makes them feel less lonely than writing about a professional achievement. What this means is that when we feel lonely, we don't need a self-esteem boost. We need connection, even if it's with a fictional character. Interestingly, fictional characters can even help to improve helpful behaviors. When people watch a movie about a superhero helping others, or when they play a video game where they see a superhero helping other people, they're more likely to help others, for example, to help a researcher when they accidentally drop a box of pencils. Another research study finds that when we dress up as certain superheroes, it can help us to maintain better attention on a boring task. So what that means is when you're struggling with your notes or work reports, put on your cape or put on your tiara and keep going. And so I wanted to now take you through an exercise that I really like utilizing with some of my clients. This is called scripting your own origin story, or the origin story exercise. This exercise is in 3 parts. And for the first part, I invite my clients to think about their own origin story in just a sentence. And so an origin story is any event in our life that takes us in a different direction. For example, it could be a death of a loved one. It could be moving to a different place. It could even be something exciting, like a new job, a new opportunity, but might bring its own stressors with it. And then for the second part of this exercise, I invite my clients to think about a personal hero that they look up to. This could be a real life person or a fictional character. This could be a family member, like a grandparent. It could be a historical or a religious figure. It could be a figure of history, or it just needs to be someone who is a figure of compassion and wisdom. And then for the third part of this exercise, I invite my clients to imagine that they have about 20 minutes alone with this character. And this character knows everything about them. This character knows everything that this person is going through, all of their strengths and all their aspirations. And this hero has the most empowering words of wisdom for this person. And so I invite my clients to write out what their personal hero might say to them. And a lot of times this exercise brings a lot of emotion, a lot of tears, because people are able to find their own personal inspiration, their own inner wisdom that they might not have known that exists there. For example, people might write, that their hero might say to them, "You're making a difference in other people's lives," or "The choices that you've made were smart and have allowed you to get to where you are now." And so I think that using inspirational characters can really help our clients to find their own path to healing. And I imagine at least some of you might be wondering now, okay, that's great, but what do I do if my client likes a villain? Should I be concerned? Should I be assessing for homicidal ideation? What do I do in this case? Well, what I have found out is most people who like villains like them for a reason. And so I want to share with you a case study. And we're going to call this person Erin, but that's not her real name. And so Erin came to see me for social anxiety. She was a young woman in a company full of men. And she said that she was the only woman at her job and the only person who had not gotten a raise for 5 years. Emily said that she was very shy, very socially anxious, and had a really difficult time speaking her truth. And then I asked Emily, what are some of the movies or TV shows or books that you like? And Emily said that she likes Star Wars. I said, great, I love Star Wars. And I said, who is your favorite character? And Emily said, Kylo Ren. And she said it loud. She took up posture, big posture in her chair. Her voice sounded empowered when she spoke. And in case you're not familiar with this character, Kylo Ren is a villain or an anti-hero, depending on how you think of him, in the latest Star Wars trilogies. And so I asked Erin, what makes you like Kylo Ren? And she said, I like that he gets angry. And I said, interesting. Do you ever get angry? And she said, oh, no, no, no. I never get angry. I said, okay, okay. And so it turned out that Erin was taught that girls are not allowed to get angry. She was taught that girls are supposed to be nice, and she was taught that that meant that she's never allowed to show any strong emotions. And so over the next 2 months, in all our sessions, we practiced channeling Erin's dark side. We practiced channeling her inner Kylo Ren, but, without killing people, of course. And we were practicing setting boundaries. We were practicing using her empowered voice. And so after 2 months, Erin asked for a meeting with her boss, and she asked for a raise. And you know what? She got it. She got the whole thing that she asked for. And so to celebrate, she took herself to Disneyland and built herself her very own Kylo Ren lightsaber. And now she cosplays, she dresses up as Kylo Ren at different comic conventions and Halloween events because Kylo Ren is her figure of empowerment. He gave her the permission to feel angry and to stand up for herself. I'm going to skip a couple of these slides. I think very often people, especially women, right, we're taught to put ourselves last, but that doesn't really work, right? Many of us shame ourselves for needing to rest, for needing to take care of ourselves. And when people shame themselves, I like to invite them to participate in a dragon counting exercise. So I tell my clients, some people just get up and they go to work or they go to school, and other people have to fight a whole bunch of dragons just to get out of bed. Maybe the dragon of anxiety, the dragon of depression, the dragon of chronic pain. So how many dragons did you have to fight just to get here today? That's impressive, right? You're not lazy, you're a dragon slayer. And I think that's important to remember. I think that too many of us compare our own challenges with other people's successes. But doing that is almost like looking at the iceberg. When you see only the tip of the iceberg, that's when we only see other people's successes without recognizing all the hard work and disappointment and struggle, rejection and adversity that other people face. But at the same time, other people might be looking to you as the tip of the iceberg. Other people might only see your successes without recognizing how challenging some things are for you. And so, in order to help motivate people to their sense of purpose, I like to invite them to think about what are their core values, right? I imagine this is a familiar act exercise. What do they stand for? How do they want to be remembered? Some of you might be familiar with the eulogy exercise, right? How do you want to be remembered at the end of your life? Or maybe, what would you want your tombstone to say? For example, here lies Batman. He helped many people, as opposed to here lies John Doe. He was very good at avoiding any mistakes. So a few years ago, I attempted to do this exercise. I thought to myself, if I was to die tomorrow, what would people think of me? What would go in my tombstone? And this is what I discovered. Here lies Janina. She was very good at following her to-do list. Yikes. I do not want to be remembered this way. That is not how I want to live my life. And so when I figured this out, I broke up with my to-do list and I realized that I have some work to do. I realized that many of us need to remember to really live our lives. We need to remember to live our lives so that we have no regrets at the end. Australian nurse Bronnie Ware studied people who are at the end of their lives. And she realized that most people at the end of their lives had one or more of these 5 regrets. And then she published a book called Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And so I want to share those 5 regrets with you. Number 1, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Number 2, I wish I stayed in touch with my friends. Number 3, I wish I had the courage to express my true feelings. Number 4, I wish I had the courage to be myself, not what others expect of me. And number 5, I wish I let myself be happier. And so it is true that we need to be productive, but we also need to live our life. And I think life is a constant balancing act between what's important and productive and also what allows us to live our life with as few regrets as possible. And so one way I encourage my clients to think about taking that heroic step to living the most meaningful life they can imagine is through this story of a superhero exercise. So I invite my clients to imagine that maybe 10 years from now, there's going to be a movie about them. And this movie is called The Story of a Superhero. And this movie is about their life up until this point, and most importantly, about the impact they're going to make over the next few years. And so I invite my clients to think about, if there was this movie made about you, what would you want it to be about? And if it does exactly what it's supposed to, how would you want this movie to inspire other people? Because the idea is each and every one of us and each and every one of our clients has this idea. Maybe they haven't fully thought about it, but most of us have this idea about the impact we want to make in other people's lives, but we might not trust ourselves to make a difference. Maybe not yet. But what I find is that when we're going through trauma, it's almost like we're going through our own Phoenix experience. It's not that when we are breaking down from anxiety and depression, it's not that we are weak. It's that we are burning to become the very empowered version of a phoenix that we were meant to be. And I think many of our clients believe themselves to be weak or broken when they're going through challenges. They're not. They're the most strong people out there. And if you are burning right now, please know that this is your phoenix process. This is you becoming the very kind of hero that you were meant to be. And you will come out of this stronger, braver, more empowered, and more ready to help other people. The example I really like to use about this, as well as about how to incorporate the origin story exercise, is the Veronica Mars example. So about 10 years ago now, I was working with a teenage girl. We'll call her Lily. Of course, that's not her real name. Lily's parents brought her in for PTSD, anxiety, and depression. Lily was being bullied in school. She self-harmed. She also struggled with an eating disorder. And she really struggled to communicate what she was going through. If I asked Lily what she was feeling, she would hide behind her father and look at him with pleading eyes, asking him to answer for her. The only thing she was willing to talk about was her favorite TV show, Veronica Mars. I didn't know anything about this show, but I asked Lily what she liked about it. And she said that she liked that the character of Veronica Mars was struggling as much as Lily was. She felt that Veronica Mars, even though she was a fictional character, was the only one who could understand how lonely Lily was and how much it hurt her to be bullied. And so that night, I thought, I'm going to go home and I'm going to watch one episode of this show. Or at least that was my intention. I failed. I accidentally ended up watching the entire season in one night because the show is amazing. And here's what I found. The show is really, really good because it shares a really common experience of teenage girls. The character of Veronica Mars was drugged and sexually assaulted at a party. Her best friend was murdered. Her parents divorced and her mother left town. Her mother struggled with addiction. Veronica's boyfriend broke up with her, and all her friends all of a sudden turned on her and started bullying her. Now, that is a lot for a teenager to go through. That's a lot for any person to go through. And as I kept watching the show, something interesting happened. The character of Veronica Mars was working for her father, who's a private investigator. And Veronica Mars became kind of like a teenage Sherlock Holmes. She started solving crimes and helping people. And before I realized it, I understood why Lily liked the show. Veronica Mars found a way to develop post-traumatic growth. She found a way to help her community, to overcome her trauma, and to form new friendships. And when I came back the following week, I told Lily, I understand why you like the show, and maybe we can use something like this. And Lily said, okay. And I said, well, Veronica uses something she's really good at. She uses her detective skills to help other people. So what do you have? And Lily said, I don't have anything. And I said, well, what's something you're good at? And Lily said, nothing. And I said, okay, what is something you think a lot about? And Lily said, depression. And I said, okay, are there any other students in your school that are struggling with depression? And Lily said, I don't know, maybe one or two students. And I said, okay. And what would Veronica do? if there were some students in her school that were struggling with depression. And Lily thought about it and she said, Veronica wouldn't keep quiet. She said, Veronica would try to help. And I said, how? And she said, Veronica would make a speech. Now, this is a girl that was hiding behind her father to try to get him to speak for her. And so I said, is this what you want to do? And she said, yes. Now, I was shocked, but I was very excited. And so we spent several weeks preparing and getting ready. We practiced the speech. We put together some resources in case anybody was struggling also. And then Lily did it. She went up to her teacher in one of her classes and she asked if she could make a 5-minute mental health announcement. Her teacher said, okay. And so Lily got up in front of her class and she shared her story. She shared that she's been going through depression and anxiety, and she has a history of self-harming, and that she'd been bullied. But she said that she's starting to feel a lot better now. She said she's in therapy, she's getting help, and she said that if anyone else is struggling, they can come talk to her. If anyone has questions about mental health, they can come talk to her too. And if anyone wants to know how to find a therapist, she has the resources that we put together that she could give away. And neither one of us was prepared for what happened next. Because the moment she was done talking, all the students ran up to her. Everyone was crying, everyone was hugging her, everyone was thanking her for sharing her story. And people were sharing their stories too. And by the end of the week, everyone in school found out. People were stopping her in the hallway. People were messaging Lily at home on her cell phone. And people were thanking her for sharing her truth. And it turned out that it wasn't 2 students. It was the entire school. And it's not that everyone had depression, but everyone was going through something. And so because of this experience, a few months later, Lily partnered up with her school's guidance counselor, and they started her school's peer support mental health club, where for 1 hour every week, students would get together and they would talk about mental health. Now, that doesn't mean that all of Lily's symptoms magically went away. But what that meant was neither she nor the other students had to face them alone. And that's when healing truly happened. And so I wanted to remind you that each and every one of your clients is the hero of their own journey. But even more importantly, you are the hero of your journey too. You know how we were talking about the origin story exercise, and I said that very often I'll invite clients to think about a personal superhero who's kind and wise, and what might that person say to them? For many of your clients, that's you. You're their superhero. You're the person that your clients are having imaginary conversations with between your sessions or long after you're no longer working together. And I imagine that each and every one of you might not ever fully understand the impact that you truly make each and every day. And so from the bottom of my heart, I wanted to thank you for being a real life superhero. And please don't forget your cape. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias. Gracias, Janina. Qué hermoso. La verdad que durante toda la sesión se me iba haciendo un nudo en la garganta, mi corazón latía por otros momentos. Bueno, muchísimas gracias. Pues ya estamos ya terminando ya casi la hora. No sé si puedas darnos unos minutitos si alguien tiene preguntas, algún comentario. Somos respetuosos del tiempo, así que tú dinos, ¿qué podría?
Absolutely.
Gracias. Bueno, Adriana, Adri.
Hola, buenas noches, compañera Janina. Gracias por por traernos estas experiencias. Y ahorita que decías esta frase de cuando nos sentimos solas, nosotros buscamos conexión, me hizo pues eso, ¿no? Justo mucho sentido. Y quería preguntarte qué piensas de estas otras personas que buscan justo esa conexión con ChatGPT, ¿no? O sea, creo que eso es lo que pasa,
Mhm.
¿no? Ahí, ¿no? Como no
Yeah.
sentirse solas y conectar, ¿no?
Yeah. I think that for people who are in environments where they're constantly bullied or invalidated by their friends or family members, sometimes ChatGPT is the only compassionate being or entity or technology that they interact with. Of course, it is not a substitute for a human, but just like a fictional character, sometimes it can be a vehicle toward healing. And my hope is that over time, people will then be able to meet other folks with similar experiences and be able to socialize with others. And if my client is so lonely and so depressed that their choices are to connect with ChatGPT or die by suicide, I would rather them interact with ChatGPT. Great question. Thank you for
¿A
asking.
Lele o a Lili? Gracias, Janina. A Lele.
Hola, eh, solo, perdón, estoy un poco nerviosa. Solo quería agradecerle porque yo, la verdad, este, voy con una psicóloga, bueno, fui con una psicóloga que la verdad me ayudó muchísimo, muchísimo a todos un montón de problemas que tenía con mi autoestima y resulta que tenía ansiedad. Y me ayudó en el sentido de que descubrí, gracias a mi mamá también, que soy una persona neurodivergente. Ok. Entonces, quería agradecerle porque sus libros, en especial el de los superhéroes, me ayudó mucho. La técnica de ¿dónde están mis pies? Me encantó. En momentos de ansiedad me ayudó mucho y solamente quería agradecerle por todo y quería decirle si podría enviarle un saludo a mi psicóloga. Su nombre es Claudia Barrera. Y ya,
Claudia,
Hi,
eso.
Claudia.
Muchas
Of
gracias.
course.
Sí, Claudia.
qué hermoso. Gracias, a Lele. Y sí, conocemos a Claudia,
Thank
nuestra
you.
querida Clau, cómo no. Un abrazo a ella. Bueno, ay, ya me puse toda roja y es cuando me emociono. Bueno, ¿algún otro comentario o vamos a ir cerrando para respetar el tiempo? ¿Algo? ¿No? Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Janina. Y como bien dices, no olvidemos nuestras capas. Gracias y nos sentimos muy honradas de que hayas estado con nosotras hoy. Gracias.
Thank
Gracias, qué
you. It's an
hermoso.
honor for me too. Thank you and happy Women's Day.
Gracias.
Buen
Gracias, buenas
día.
noches.
Gracias, chicas,
Gracias, nos
chicos.
vemos.
Gracias.
Oh,
Adiós.
Gracias.
Chao, chao. Abrazo, Lele.
gracias.
Beso
Hasta
fuerte.
luego.
Adiós.
Gracias. Adiós. Uy. Mm.
Adiós, Edith. Beso. Ay, gracias,
Gracias,
Natalia.
Natalia, por tu apoyo.
Muchas gracias.
Abrazo
Muchas
inmenso,
Natalia,
gracias.
inmenso. No te
gracias.
Gracias,
mencioné,
como
disculpa.
siempre.
Gracias, gracias.
Un abrazo.
Bye, chicas.
Chao.
Nos vemos en la siguiente. Un abrazote a todas.
Gracias, Erika.
Descansen.
Evelyn,
Bye.
Marisela.
Oye, fíjate que estaba checando en la página del Facebook. El
Ujú.
link no está completo, creo.
No me digas.
Entonces, ahorita si quieren le checamos. Nada más
Bien,
para ver si solo fui yo o qué pasó, para que no tengan problema.
perfecto.
Bueno, nadie reportó porque me fui a checar el Facebook por si alguien decía no entra o algo así, pero
Ajá.
creo que todo bien.
Sí, bueno,
Gracias, Marisela. Chao.
nada más hubo un mensaje en Facebook que preguntaban sobre el código de la reunión, pero bueno,
Eso, exacto. Yo le di clic